Hi everyone, thanks very much for joining today. I have spoken to some of you on this topic before, so I feel like I might be preaching to the choir a little bit and teaching you to suck eggs, but I'm going to talk to you about some work that I've been doing where I've done a bit of research into the background of the barriers to urban nature-based solutions, why they're not being implemented more widely, considering their many uses and many benefits, and also into some discussions I had with stakeholders. Some of you are who have joined today, so yeah, I can give you a bit more background info, and there is a report coming out hopefully within the next week. We're hoping to launch it on Biodiversity Day during COP27. We needed a good hook to try and get it out there because it was just hanging over my head a little bit. So that's the plan for that. So that'll be coming out soon. But this just kind of summarizes it, gives a bit of background information and some questions at the end. It's a bit of a provocation, I suppose. So I can just share my screen. Okay. Just going to have, that's not what I want. Can you see the right screen? Not my presenter view, so you can't see all my secret notes.
Yeah, it looks good.
That's great. Yeah, so I'm the Nature-Based Solutions Policy Advisor at the Trust. And just a bit of background. So the recent IPCC report stated that in all cities and urban areas, the risk faced to people and assets from hazards caused by climate change has increased. And it also recognises the benefits to having a well-functioning ecosystem within this space, how it can play a significant role in buffering cities and settlements against these issues as well. So in Scotland, the majority of us live within the urban areas. That's 70% of Scotland's population. And many of our towns and cities have developed climate change action plans, but it seems that few of these have managed to get very far, have been implemented, or have kind of been poorly implemented. There just seems to be a lack of push behind these plans. And it can be part of the progress lacking because that nature's still kind of got that nice to have aspect. It's not something that everyone considers as a necessity. It's maybe something that's considered a bit of a burden to put it within the urban areas, which is a shame considering how much potential nature has to help us with these issues. So nature-based solutions, I won't dwell on this too much, but we at the Trust are advocating for the IUCN definition and also recognise the UN Environment Assembly that they've adopted this definition and built on it as well to be a bit more inclusive around Indigenous and local communities. So having that extra aspect. And then unfortunately, currently nature-based solutions within the urban areas are underfunded and underappreciated in many aspects of urban planning. But there are many examples and options and multiple scales and provide multiple benefits. So this is just one example. These two charts compare a conventional drainage system within the urban area and a more green, biodiverse, sustainable urban drainage system, and demonstrate the multiple benefits that can come from this sustainable urban drainage system as opposed to the conventional one. You can see the conventional one provides extra land value and property value and improves the water quality and quantity, but if we did that in a more green, sustainable way, you'd get the added community benefits, you'd get added biodiversity, the land and property value would be increased, you'd get health and well-being benefits, you'd get reduction or managing temperature a bit more, you'd get improved air quality. There'd be so many extra benefits that these can build on. And this was, just to give the credits, stolen from the UK Green Building Council, who have put recently who have some work on ways in which to increase the uptake and promote the value of nature-based solutions in the built environment. So I'll just go some examples. Some of you might recognise this. This is the Glasgow Canal and North Gateway, which was part done by Glasgow City Council and Scottish Canals, and they worked together to regenerate this urban area into a more green kind of nature-based solution, but also it was combined with some technology that enables some adaptation to adjust as the rainfall changes and allowing different areas to flood. And so this has made more space for people on top of the increasing resilience to flooding, but it also has improved the natural environment, increased biodiversity, and it's estimated to have saved £450 million compared to the grey infrastructure that would achieve the same kind of flood prevention benefits. And this graph just shows the benefits from a human aspect when it comes to enjoying the outdoor space. So many more people have been using the space within 2021. And that will be in part from the impact of COVID restrictions, but just having that space for people to enjoy has done a lot for I imagine people's health and people's mental health. And it would be interesting to see if we could actually have that a figure from that to demonstrate what savings have been have happened for say the NHS or something like that with the additional health benefits from the green space. Another example in some international examples. So this is the Bosco Verticale, which translates to vertical forest, and this is in Milan, where they have planted over 800 trees on these two apartment blocks. And I think the space, the trees planted in there and all the other shrubs and plants that have been used amounts to about a hectare of woodland. So this has provided, this has improved the air quality, it keeps the building cool and provides green jobs, a kind of vertical gardeners perhaps. But and while this looks very impressive and very futuristic and is very innovative, there is the issue around this is maybe a bit exclusive. If you were wanting to purchase one of the properties within these buildings, it will set you back north of €2 million. So it's not the most accessible, but I think projects like this are very worthwhile in that it helps that innovation, and any lessons learned can then be used in a more accessible or a more maybe a more down-to-earth way. You can see roundabout there's also areas of green space used in the smaller buildings as well, and the kind of spread of that urban green area as a result of kind of the money being put into projects like this. A maybe more accessible example, this is the Green Corridor project in Medellin in Colombia, and where they've transformed 18 roads and 12 waterways into corridors throughout the city. And this change has made considerable impact on the urban temperature, reducing the temperature by about 2 degrees, which has a significant impact for people who live in the city and enjoy the space. They've also hired multiple urban gardeners and trained people up. And the gardeners have also, the local people have a big respect for the gardeners there as well. So they obviously mean a lot to everyone there. And you see in the top left corner, that space was a derelict area and has now been transformed into a community garden for people to enjoy. The cost benefit for this amounts to around $136 million, but that's between 2020 and 2030. So through the work that I've been doing, where I've been looking at the existing research and the kind of done a bit of a literature review to what some of the barriers are towards scaling up urban nature-based solutions, it's still a relatively new concept in the grand scheme of things, although admittedly, I think it was first coined in around 2008 by the World Bank. And this kind of newness is still impacting the confidence in funding opportunities. But so there's a bit of an issue around changing the status quo. Previous examples of change in the urban environment, such as moving towards more low carbon changes, it suggests that innovative ways forward and those sort of changing the status quo can be difficult because of existing social and technical regimes, such as the policies behind these and the governance behind them as well. And there's also a bit of a negative perception around the cost and reliability of these interventions. Perhaps nature is considered too slow or too soft or just a nice thing to have. And it's not really, sometimes there's the perception of it not being a serious management option. And there's also concern around the unknown costs associated there. There's also the lack of collaborative governance. So this maybe fits into the state, changing the status quo, and how there's kind of silos within government, and there needs to be that more communication between them. There's maybe a lack of public awareness and support. People maybe see green interventions as being something that is maybe untidy. When they take time to bed in for things to grow, they can look a bit like piles of dirt. But so there needs to be a bit of education there. There's maybe a lack of awareness of what nature can provide for us, what benefits we gain from nature. And there's often projects are done in isolation. So there's that lack of connectivity between different projects within a city, which maybe can prevent them from being, from gaining as many benefits as they possibly could if they were looked at a broader scale. So some of the opportunities that come across, there's already many positive examples out there. That just a few that I gave. There's lots of more local ones as well that are able to demonstrate the ability of kind of upscaling and mainstreaming nature-based solutions, the benefits we can get from those, the multiple benefits. And there's also some evidence from the drawback of grey infrastructure that's often used instead of a nature-based solution. There's the inability of that to adapt to a changing climate. And then we also have the issue around, the benefit of long-term money savings, so all those extra benefits that can be provided by nature-based solutions on the longer terms, is the health benefits, whether that's ongoing cleaning of the air, of the water, something that a grey intervention wouldn't provide us. Nature-based solutions could also offer a way into innovative governance. It requires breaking of those silos, and there's projects that I think Gillian was involved in around the Connecting Nature projects, and how that has helped. The evidence has demonstrated that breaking those silos is possible, and it's a good way of doing it through nature-based solutions. There's a greater appreciation of nature, especially across the public, as a result of COVID, and that demand for green space and the appreciation of the green space around us. There's also the option of nature networks. Nature-based solutions can help connect spaces which are already green within or protected areas within an urban environment. And that can help create the nature network, which is currently being put forward in policies such as the National Planning Framework. And if that's properly implemented, this will be a great way of implementing nature-based solutions more broadly. So just going into the kind of nature network side of things, some of you will have been involved in the Edinburgh Nature Network that we partnered with the Edinburgh City Council, looking at spaces within the city where there's demand for greater environmental, greater ecosystem services. And this was done through opportunity mapping, where we looked at the habitat network that already exists, the ecosystem services that are coming from this habitat, spoke to local communities and looked at opportunity areas, and looked at things like the index of multiple deprivation, and getting those kind of social aspects, and then layering that together and seeing where these opportunities are, which provide multiple benefits for both people and for the environment and climate change mitigation or adaptation as well. I took this picture in part just to demonstrate that if we were to prioritize nature within our urban environment, this is something that it could look like. This is maybe a very romanticized version. This was done with an artist and one of my colleagues, Donya Davidson, who's now moved on to Nature Scott, but she is an ecologist by kind of training. So they looked at all the different opportunities there could be for nature within. So this is Leith Walk, or Leith Walk on the Wild Side, as the artist's impression is, and just to demonstrate how nature can kind of bring people out a bit more, bring that community feel, kind of it could increase the footfall in the local area, so there's more business for local businesses, and just to demonstrate some of the possible benefits of improving nature within the urban environment. Maybe this is in the extreme, but personally I would love it. So going on to the stakeholder discussions I had as a follow-up to looking into the existing research. So I was asking people from areas such as planning, development, community groups, conservation charities, city councils, a kind of academic side of things as well, of what it's like trying to implement nature-based solutions on the ground. So we discussed things like the terms used, what it's like trying to get the public involved, whether there was a management or a monitoring aspect in there, where data was collected, how easy that was, how easy it was to get funding, where the funding came from, and what kind of conflicting priorities there might be in there as well with the different stakeholders involved, and what it's like kind of working with a government aspect or governance aspect as well. So some of the barriers that came up from the discussions I had, it was kind of around the ease of access to available information. It was maybe something that came up more with the developers, the construction side of things. A lot of the language used is maybe something that we're used to, but maybe not so much when it comes to the more kind of practical side of things, and also just the access, where to find this sort of thing. So there maybe needs to be a bit of a change there. The underlying policy structures were a bit of a hindrance in some aspects. One example was given to me in that the tender process was a little bit difficult to prioritize nature, in that because it wasn't maybe the cheapest option from the beginning. There was an issue of it wasn't competitive when green interventions were used, but because that doesn't really take into account the long-term benefits of having nature-based solutions in a space. There's maybe a lack of skills and understanding of the use of nature-based solutions within a space, and the lack of governance protocols there for a project. So kind of the leadership and who should be involved, and what where the costs are and where the benefits are gleaned from that. There was a bit of communication issues between key players. I think this is something that came up within kind of city council, the different departments involved. There needed to breach the silos there, who spoke to whom, kind of maybe within the transport or the water, those sort of departments there, and then also the parks and green space. So it needs to cut across all those areas. And then finally, the funding opportunities. There's a lot going on. I think it's something that many of you will be involved in, and I know a lot of the finance pioneers will be looking into all these options and coming up with lots of opportunities as well. So it's still an ever-pressing issue, and all these previous barriers kind of feed into a level of risk there, which could be off-putting for finding that funding opportunity. But there are also many opportunities were brought up there as well. So like I mentioned, the private sector funding is becoming more accessible, and there's many more options there, and different scales as well, that are kind of being brought to the fore. And there's a growing awareness and appreciation of nature, as I mentioned previously, and the many knock-on aspects of increased green spaces. So like I mentioned, bringing people into the area, giving some innovative ways of using the green space, giving more options for people to come up with innovative business models as well. There could be opportunities for new skill development, and could maybe include the nature-based solutions or green infrastructure a bit more into aspects of green infrastructure, a bit more into professional disciplines such as architecture and planning, and developing kind of professional disciplines as well, for CBD, or continued professional development. That's the one I'm looking for. And then there's also been quite a bit of encouragement from developers as well. So there's a lot of people are on board with this. They want to do it. They just need a little bit of help there, and they're getting some push from insurers. So some are finding it difficult to get insurance if there's not, if they've not looked into options, especially around green nature-based solutions for flood management, for water management. So that's quite positive to hear. So just in a bit of conclusion for this, these are the kind of key areas that popped out. They're not particularly unique to this issue. I think it's something that's broadly across many kind of similar issues. So the need for to have the evidence in space which is nice and accessible for various different audiences, and a level of transparency there as well to see how things like the investment is used, the education on why nature-based solutions are the kind of best way forward and how to implement them, and maybe use in professional development, the communication around nature-based solutions, getting people involved in the conversation as early as possible so that those kind of connections can be made, and those that understanding can be made, and also include all the relevant stakeholders, everyone from the community to the city council, and then the investment needed at the right scale, at the right speed to support the necessary mainstreaming, and just that greater incentive and support for that level of risk that might be involved. The need for engagement with all local demographics, so whether that's also includes the kind of minority and vulnerable groups as well, to ensure that nature-based solutions, all the benefits, the greatest benefits can be gathered from the intervention. Where am I going? And then finally the governance aspect, which is something kind of around the need for leadership to avoid these projects kind of stalling, the regulations to remove some of the barriers there as well, and also just for a need for a legacy as well, so that when, say, organizations like ourselves might step back and give it to the community, they need to feel empowered to take responsibility there and know what to do, and have a level of support ongoing as well. So the next few slides are actually questions that I've pulled out from the research that, well, all the feedback that I've had, and this is just to kind of gather more feedback. And I'd also be interested to hear from yourselves about whether there's any more barriers that you see, whether you don't agree with some of them. There's probably some there. I guess it's all from all different points of view, so it's very varied what barriers and what opportunities people have seen. I mean, I won't go into these questions right now, maybe because I'll pass on the report that is going to be published soon, so we don't need to go into these too much. But this question is just about what can be done to promote nature-based solutions over grey infrastructure, how we can demonstrate those benefits a bit better. How can more investment be encouraged? I think that's something that the finance pioneers are on board, or on top of rather, and how can we ensure those ensure fair returns? So that's also for the community and for the investors involved. And meaningful communication between all the stakeholders. How can we get those, make sure that's prioritized as well, make sure nature is prioritized, and make sure people understand why. What can be done to improve the access and understanding of existing resources? That's kind of around kind of communication, but all the information that's already out there, how can we make sure it's accessible? And then what can we do to improve the engagement across private and public actors and support the planners and developers, so those who are already on board, those that are maybe kind of struggling to see the benefits there, and how can we get those that are keen to be advocates for it, advocates for including nature in urban planning. How can the projects reach more people to make sure everyone is considered, everyone's priorities are considered within a kind of local demographic, all the different demographics. And then finally, how can we ensure that projects are well managed and communities can continue to champion and support them and make the most of the nature-based solutions after development, after that stage has been done. So I'm not expecting you to answer these questions. So these are just the questions that I've pulled out of the work that I've done. That's everything from me. Thank you for listening. And yeah, any questions, please let me know.